On a bone-chilling winter evening, Ethan's breath curled in the air like soft smoke as he approached his front porch. Each footstep crunched against hardened frost, and the wind bit at his cheeks with icy fingers. Then, carried on that cold draft, came a faint, plaintive cry. Pausing, Ethan strained to listen. There it was again, a tiny mew of distress. Curiosity and concern drove him forward until he spotted them. A wild bobcat, her amber eyes reflecting the dim porch light, stood just beyond the threshold. Behind her, two cubs huddled so close to her flanks that they seemed almost a single creature. Their tiny bodies trembled like leaves in a storm, the mother's thick fur puffed with frost, yet her ribs showed through in pale relief. Despite her wild grace, she looked starved, desperate, and somehow pleading. What on earth would bring a bobcat family to his door on a night like this? But the answer came almost immediately. The mother bobcat lifted one snowy paw and pressed it against the glass of the door as though instinctively understanding it to be a barrier. She could beg to be opened. Her gaze locked onto Ethan's with a fierce combination of caution and hope and hope. In that moment, every tale he'd ever heard about wild creatures seeking shelter in extreme weather felt more than just a story. It was happening before his eyes. Heart pounding, he wondered if he dared help. Would any ordinary person do the same? Summoning courage, Ethan cracked the door ajar just enough to let a rush of warm air escape into the night. At first, the bobcat froze, her brilliant eyes scanning the interior. Then, as if weighing risk against the promise of warmth, she stepped forward with deliberate, soft-footed grace. Soft-footed grace. Her two cubs slipped inside behind her in single file, tiny paws clicking on the wooden floor. Ethan held the door open until the last shiver of cold air had spilled out, then silently tugged it closed, sealing them away from the storm. Tome. Hop, hop. Inside, droplets of icy water scattered across the floor as the mother bobcat shook herself, sending crystals flying like shattered glass. The cubs pressed against her legs, mewing softly in confusion and relief. They were a picture of vulnerability, each breath visible in the frigid air, now replaced by the gentle warmth of Ethan's living room. From the far end of the room, Ethan watched, unsure whether to remain motionless or reach out. The mother bobcat, still alert, ears twitching at every unfamiliar sound, sniffed the still warm air. Something in her demeanor told him that she sensed his intentions were friendly, even if her wild instincts screamed caution. And just like that, Ethan felt an overwhelming surge of compassion. He slipped away to the kitchen, each step creaking quietly under the weight of his own racing thoughts. He rummaged through his fridge, hoping for any scrap of nourishment. All he found was leftover chicken, plain, unseasoned. Yet, it would have to do. Gently, he reheated it, mindful that the slightest steam might startle them. He placed the meat on a plate and carried it back to the living room, setting it carefully a few feet from the bobcat. She watched him with unblinking eyes, then padded forward to examine the food. Her cubs followed in her wake, but she nudged them back, ensuring she assessed the safety of the meal first. After a moment's hesitation, she began to eat, her sharp teeth picking delicately at the chicken. The cubs, reassured, scattered to join her feast. As they ate, Ethan noticed the mother's belly seemed swollen, not just with recent hunger. His breath caught, so she wasn't only feeding her existing cubs, she was carrying more life within her. The realization settled like a soft blanket over his anxiety. Here was a mother in dire straits, risking everything to protect her existing young and an unborn litter in the merciless cold. Yet, instead of fleeing, she had entrusted this human with her family's safety. As the storm raged outside, Ethan felt a fierce determination to honor that trust. By the glow of the fireplace, where embers glowed like dying stars, Ethan fashioned a makeshift bed. He draped blankets over an old mattress, tucking corners to form a cozy nest in the corner of the room. Under. The mother bobcat approached, sniffing the soft layers with careful curiosity, then, as if giving her silent approval, lay down and curled around her cubs. The little ones burrowed into her warm fur, tails twitching contentedly. Ethan stood back, his heart pounding at the surreal domesticity of it all. A wild family napping at home, as natural as any pet cat. He tiptoed away, bewildered by his own wonder. Morning soft light filtered through frosted windows when Ethan woke. The mother bobcat and her cubs were still nestled together in the corner. He moved slowly, not to startle them, grabbing his phone and snapping a few photos for identification. He slipped outside into the fresh snow, which lay untouched as a thick white blanket. The neighborhood was silent. Footprints were a rare commodity here. He paused at the first house and knocked, showing strangers the extraordinary images on his screen. Their eyes widened, disbelief etched into each face. Into each face. Bobcat, inside your house? One neighbor gasped. Another suggested calling animal control, but Ethan shook his head. He couldn't bear the thought of separating a mother from her vulnerable cubs, especially knowing another litter was on the way. Back home, Ethan scoured wildlife forums and local news sites, hoping to find any mention of bobcat sightings or missing animals in the area. The results were empty. No reports, no photographs, no alerts. It felt as if this family had appeared out of thin air. The weight of responsibility pressed on him. They had come seeking help, and he could not turn his back. Over the next days, life settled into an extraordinary routine. Ethan drove to the butcher for raw meat, collected supplies to build a small litter box, and rearranged furniture to give the cubs more room to explore. At first, the mother remained on edge, retreating if he came too close. But as he cleaned around her bedding, removed soiled blankets, and refilled their food plate, her tension gradually eased. She observed him from a distance, eyes narrowed but no longer fleeing. Trust, it seemed, could be built one quiet gesture at a time. One late afternoon, as Ethan's prepared his own dinner, he noticed the mother pacing in a slow, rhythmic circle. Her ears lay flat against her head, and her tail flicked with restless energy. Instinct whispered in Ethan's mind. Labour. He hurried to soften her bedding, stacking extra blankets in the corner, and dimming the lights to a gentle glow. He stood a respectful distance away and watched as contraction by contraction passed, each punctuating the silent room with promise. Then came the muffled wail of new life, her newborn cubs arriving one after another, each tiny cry a testament to her strength. Ethan felt tears prick his eyes as he realized he was witnessing both the most vulnerable and triumphant moment of nature. When the last cub joined its siblings at their mother's side, Ethan exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The mother bobcat lay back, exhausted but resplendent in her victory. Around her, 6 cubs, 2 older ones, and 4 newborns, nuzzled for a first taste of warmth and sustenance. The room, once just a living room, had transformed into a sanctuary. As the weeks passed, Ethan's home thrummed with life. The older cubs discovered the thrill of leaping onto furniture, their tiny claws clicking on hardwood in gleeful abandon. When they slipped or slid, they tumbled in slow-motion stumbles that Ethan watched with delighted laughter. The newborns, still blind and fragile, stayed close to their mother, their soft mews filling the corners of the house like music. To keep the older ones engaged, Ethan fashioned climbing structures from spare wood and hung toys that jingled and spun. He read everything he could about bobcat health, ensuring their diet met the needs of both growing and pregnant cats. Tates. Though danger still shimmered at the edges of their relationship, the mother's keen gaze, always alert, her trust in Ethan solidified. She allowed him to approach for feedings, even brushing at her bedding as she dozed, and sometimes accepted meat from his hand. In return, Ethan respected her boundaries, never forcing contact, always honoring her need for space. Together, they crafted an uneasy but enduring balance. Finally, the relentless snowstorms gave way to gentler breezes of early spring. Ethan knew the bobcat family could not live indoors forever. He consulted a local wildlife expert who guided him on building an outdoor enclosure to bridge the gap between safety and freedom. In his backyard, Ethan constructed a large pen with high walls and natural brush, simulating a small forest clearing. When he opened the enclosure door for the first time, the mother bobcat slipped out without hesitation, padding into the chilly air while teaching her cubs to follow. They ventured together toward the tree line. At the forest's edge, the mother paused and looked back. Her deep amber eyes found Ethan's, and for a heartbeat, time stilled. Then, with a flick of her tail, she turned away and melted into the forest's shadows. Shadows, one by one, the cubs bounded after her, tails high, bodies lithe with newfound confidence. Left alone at the enclosure gate, Ethan watched until the last rustle of movement vanished. The silence that returned felt both vast and comforting, filled with the echo of playful mews and the warmth of shared days. Back inside, he found their scattered toys and the impressions of little paws pressed into his floors. Tangible reminders of their presence. In the months that followed, memories of that winter night returned to him often. He would pause by the window on cold evenings, imagining the mother bobcat teaching her cubs to climb and hunt among the pines. He liked to think their wild spirits thrived, unbroken by their time indoors. Though they had ventured back into the untamed world, their imprint on his life endured. A testament to trust, compassion, and the extraordinary bonds that can blossom between human and creature under the harshest of conditions.